The Fallout franchise has sold over 60 million copies, making it the 11th best-selling RPG franchise of all time, and recently has really come into the mainstream because of the Fallout TV show. But it wasn't always like this. This series started in relative obscurity back in the late 90s, so I'm here to find out exactly how it came to be a cultural phenomenon and which games are still worth playing, and I'll be ranking them on an F to S tier list. So let's do this. It's 1997, Tamagotchis are dying in backpacks across America, the Spice Girls are absolutely everywhere, and somewhere in California, a guy named Tim Kaine is about to release one of the greatest RPGs ever made. Now, if your only experience with Fallout is wandering around the Commonwealth in Fallout 4 or getting heartbroken by New Vegas companions, this game is going to feel like a different universe, because it kind of is. But don't let that scare you off. Fallout 1 was a masterpiece, full stop. Here's what made it special. Your choices actually mattered, and not in that modern like pick dialogue option A or B and watch the same cutscene kind of way. I mean genuinely, meaningfully mattered. Want to shoot your way through every problem? Go for it. Pow! Pow! I'm the fucking rat deleter. You prefer talking? The game respects that too.
Nobody ever double crosses Gizmo and lives to talk about it. You got me.
God, his voice acting's great, but God is it gross. Early on, you stumble into this tense situation. A raider's got a hostage at gunpoint. Classic setup, right? That's it, don't come any closer, I'll off her, I swear. Most games would funnel you toward the obvious solution. Put a bullet in his head, rescue the girl, and feel heroic. But I talked to the guy instead. Let's talk about this. Why do you want to hurt her? She left at my willy. And you know what? He left, peacefully. No violence required. Tim Kaine put it perfectly. It was the consequence of action. Do what you want, so long as you can accept the consequences. And that philosophy runs through every inch of this game. It's almost a lost art now, honestly. Modern games hold your hands so much you'd think they were afraid you'd wander off and hurt yourself. Speaking of consequences, let me tell you about Necropolis. So there's this main quest to retrieve a water chip for your vault. You eventually find yourself in Necropolis, this crumbling city populated entirely by ghouls. Turns out they have a water chip, but they're using it because their water pump is busted. Fair enough. They even offer you a deal. Find some replacement parts, help fix the pump, and they'll share the chip with you. Reasonable, right? Or you could do what I did. I accidentally murdered several ghouls the moment I arrived. Things escalated. I ended up just stealing their water chip and bouncing. You aren't thinking of taking the water chip from us, are you? Me? No, I would never do such a thing. I'm just gonna see how it all works. And the result, every single ghoul in Necropolis died of dehydration. And I came back a few days later and looted their corpses. Name another game where you can accidentally commit like 15 consecutive war crimes and the game just lets you live with it. There's no reload prompt, no moral judgment screen, just consequences rippling outward. See, normally those ghouls would have pointed you toward the story objective that comes next after you returned with the water chip. But since I'd, killed them all through negligent genocide, I had to find the Brotherhood of Steel instead. Or as I like to call them, the fuck yeah big dudes in badass power armor. Alright, I've been gushing pretty hard here. But what about the stuff that hasn't aged well? This game's approaching its 30th anniversary, so there's gotta be something, right? Honestly, I can only really think of two issues. First, the random encounters can be absolutely brutal depending on how spiteful the game's feeling that day. You'll be casually strolling through shady sands, minding your own business, and boom! 4 death claws materialize out of nowhere and proceed to ruin your entire afternoon. Second, the control scheme. It's vintage, if you will, generously speaking. Using an item from your inventory requires this whole ritual. You right click, and then you left click, and you hold, and then you drag down to select the use hand icon. Except if you've never played before, the use hand icon looks almost identical to the drop hand. I've actually thrown away stim packs more times than I'd like to admit. But that's really it. Beyond those quirks, Fallout 1 remains a genuinely fantastic experience. Playing it, you could feel exactly where the love for this franchise was born.
So there we were, surrounded on all sides by riot scorpions, but we locked the fuck in, firing off a single shot at the eyeballs. A risky maneuver, but if landed, it does insane damage. And it would not land this time, and we were fucked. But we were switched to our trusty sidearm, and in our turn. In the meantime, taking back shots from scorpions. It's not ow. You start to understand why longtime fans keep saying Bethesda never really understood what Fallout was supposed to be. But here's the strange part though. Despite everything this game got right, it underperformed commercially. It didn't set the world on fire sales-wise, but it planted something, a seed, a lit fuse. And that fuse would eventually lead to what's now the 11th best-selling RPG franchise of all time. Not bad for a weird little isometric game from the Tamagotchi era. And because of this, I'll be slotting it in a solid A tier to start off our list. I liked it more than I thought I would, and it was actually quite fun. Oh god,
Guys, I gotta draw my screen back. Give me a second. Hey, watch this. I'm going to draw a pee-pee. And there we go. What is going on? A year later, Interplay came back, but this time they swung in a completely different direction. Where Fallout 1 was a tight, narrative-driven experience, Fallout 2 was more of like a sandbox RPG, and on paper, that sounds incredible. My experience, however, looked a little more like this.
Could I use my cursor?
I can't. Gotta crash the fuck out. Oh, man. But honestly, don't read into that too hard. I could crash out playing literally anything at this point. So you play as a descendant of the original Vault Dweller, sent out to find a Garden of Eden creation kit, a gag, to save your people from starvation.
Withering crops.
It's a crop. What, like a dookie. That eventually pulls you into a war with the Enclave.
Where is your power armor?
And their crown jewel of nightmare fuel, Special Agent Frank Horrigan.
Time for talking's over.
Which sounded pretty cool by itself. The problem, however, is that somewhere between the serious post-apocalyptic drama, the developers also decided to stuff the game with so many pop culture references that it starts to feel less like a wasteland and more like a fever dream from someone's DVD collection. The Enclave's vice president is named Dan Bird, a direct parody of Dan Quayle, George Bush Sr.'s VP. Fine, whatever, a bit political reference, whatever. But then you find a Monty Python reference.
What is your name?
A prison called Castle Anthrax, complete with a Brotherhood soldier named Galahad rescued by Lancelot.
My name is Sir Lancelot of Camelot.
And then in New Reno, there's a boxer who bites ears, a Mike Tyson reference. And it just keeps going. Now, pop culture references in games aren't automatically a sin. The issue here is the sheer density. They are everywhere, and they're blatant enough that they kind of pull you clean out of the world every single time. Back in 1998, these were probably funnier, because all of it was current. But now they're obscure enough that you have to like actively research why a ghoul's making a specific reference, which is maybe the least immersive thing imaginable. That said, and this is important, strip away the pop culture debris, and the actual game underneath is genuinely good. The dialogue got a serious upgrade.
In this man's army until you are 510 years old.
The world is massive, and the companions are actually useful this time rather than just walking damage sponges.
Stronger right to it.
Oh, and they added a take all button when looting. I know that sounds minor, but it isn't. Having to click every single item individually in Fallout 1 was quietly one of the most exhausting things in gaming, so that one button alone improved my life significantly. But despite all that, Fallout 1 is still my preference. The smaller, tighter world gave it a tonal consistency that Fallout 2, built by different teams across different cities, just couldn't maintain. The bigger map didn't make it a better game, it just mostly made it a longer game.
Fuck's sakes, this fucking stupid ass fucking thing.
You know, I don't have to take this game. So, Fallout 2 lands in B tier for me. It's worth playing, but it's not without some frustrations. But now, let's move on to one of Fallout's many spin-offs. Fresh off the back-to-back releases of Fallout 1 and 2, Interplay decided to outsource the next entry to an Australian studio called Micro Forte, so that their main team could work on bigger things like Fallout 3. The result was Fallout Tactics, a squad-based tactics game that had absolutely nothing to do with what made Fallout special. My best guess is that someone looked at the runaway success of Final Fantasy Tactics in 1998 and thought, oh yeah, we want some of that. Which is reasonable business logic, however, it ended up being a terrible creative decision. The intro had me genuinely hyped though. Big guy in power armor, bandits about to catch these hands. I was ready.
Welcome to the Brotherhood of Steel.
Woo! Oh yeah! That is until the actual gameplay started, and that power trip evaporated in about 45 seconds. Because controlling a squad in this game feels like trying to herd cats through a minefield. And I say that as someone who enjoys strategy games. But the controls are genuinely hostile here, and the difficulty curve swings between tedious and completely unreasonable.
We died.
And once the combat loop stops feeling novel, you realize that's basically all the game has. Unlike its predecessors, there was no real meaningful dialogue, no exploration, no choices with weight behind them. All things that the Fallout series was known for. This was just mission after mission of tactical combat, coated in a Fallout skin. Then there's the lore, which is where things get quite irritating. The original games established that the vaults weren't just shelters, they were experiments. Cruel, deliberate, fascinating social experiments that added a real darkness to the world. Fallout Tactics just quietly ignores that and treats them as straightforward bunkers for rich people. It's not a small detail to get wrong, it's kind of the whole philosophical backbone of the setting. The game isn't completely worthless, but I really wouldn't play it again except for the novelty of saying I had played it. It's carrying a name that comes with specific expectations, and for me it fails almost all of them. F tier. Hopefully the next game isn't as bad.
More on the surface fell victim to the burning, poisonous air.
This has got to be the strangest Fallout game ever made. In 2004, in an attempt to generate some quick revenue to save their studio's potential bankruptcy, Interplay developed Fallout Brotherhood of Steel for consoles. Again, looking to mooch off the success of another IP. Just like their previous game, they saw Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance's success on consoles, and they aimed to expand the Fallout IP into the lucrative console action market to keep the company afloat. It, however, did not, obviously. Fallout Brotherhood of Steel bombed. Fallout pun intended. It got poor sales, negative reviews, and a planned sequel that got quietly cancelled before it ever saw daylight. So naturally, I had to find out exactly what went wrong. And within 3 seconds of playing the game, I got my answer. Look at my Naruto run. I'm all for a good action game, but this is not a good action game. This game strayed from the series' core RPG mechanics, adopting an action-oriented style with almost no regard for any kind of story, which resulted in the low sales and the cancellation of a planned sequel. I'm not opposed to action games, I actually love a good one. But this one, like I said, is not a good one. The camera angle alone is so poorly thought out that half the time I couldn't even tell what I was supposed to be hitting, let alone actually hit it. Enemies kind of blend into environments, the targeting feels really awkward to use with guns, and the whole thing collapses into a rhythm of walking into a room, mashing attack, and praying for things to die, which is boring when there's no actual mechanics to like any of the fights. I have weapons? Why did these not start equip? So yeah, this game honestly just fucking sucks. And the story, the thing that elevated even the roughest edges of the first 2 games, is basically a footnote. The Fallout name is just like a costume draped over a mediocre brawler, and a pretty ugly one at that. And what makes this even sadder is the context. This wasn't a passion project that missed the mark. Interplay made this because they were desperate, and desperation is not a great creative foundation apparently. They needed a hit badly enough that they gutted everything that made Fallout worth caring about in the first place. Therefore, the audience, predictably, didn't show up for what was left. I can't do this anymore. I'm going to bed, bro. I'm like falling asleep while playing. This game rightfully deserves another F tier. Bottom of F tier, in fact, below Tactics. The franchise could have, and probably should have died right here, and it almost did, if not for one small little company you might have heard of. That little company was Bethesda, and the game they made saved the entire franchise. Todd Howard had just finished turning the RPG genre on its head with Oblivion, and working with the same engine and a healthy amount of recycled assets, they completely transformed the world of Fallout into something nobody had seen before. The result was Fallout 3. The first 3D Fallout, the first first-person Fallout, and technically the first Fallout game to actually sell well, with 4.7 million copies in just its first week, absolutely dwarfing the previous games. This wasn't just a successful game. It was the exact moment Fallout stopped being a cult classic and started spreading its roots to stardom. Before any of that meant anything to me, Fallout 3 was just a game my dad played on the couch when I was 6 years old. Me and my brother sitting either side of him, jar of cheese balls between us, watching him navigate the capital wasteland with a very peculiar playstyle that I still think about. So when it was finally my turn to play it properly, Jadingus Bingus, there was already something loaded into that experience before I'd even pressed start. The game opens with you as a baby, which is technically not the classic Bethesda prisoner sequence, but you are trapped underground in a vault. You can't leave. Therefore, in like a roundabout way, Bethesda found a new and slightly weirder path to the exact same starting point. What the Vault prologue is actually doing, though, is something much smarter than it gets credit for. Every conversation and subtle reference from the NPCs around you is quietly building pressure. The surface world is out there, and the game spends hours making sure you feel the weight of that before you ever reach it. Now, if you played Oblivion, you already know what's coming, because Bethesda pulled this exact same trick before, stepping out of the sewers into Cyrodiil for the first time. That moment practically stole an entire console generation on open world games by itself. But lightning doesn't usually strike twice, and yet somehow, when those vault doors open and the light pours in, it does exactly that. The doors open, the lights hit, and you step out in that capital wasteland for the first time. See, Bethesda has a design mantra. See it? Go there. If something catches your eye on the horizon, you can walk to it. And the capital wasteland was built entirely around that idea as well. There's always something pulling you forward, a silhouette, a crumbling structure, a faint shape you can't quite identify yet. The wasteland feels enormous but never directionless, which is an incredibly hard thing to pull off when your entire palette is rubble and gray fields with no living vegetation. What makes it work underneath all the atmosphere is what the world is actually saying. Every object in the capital wasteland carries this tension between 1950s American optimism and the catastrophe that optimism eventually produced. the retro futurist architecture, the Nuka-Cola, and then right in the middle of a civilian settlement, a fully intact nuclear bomb that nobody has bothered to move. That bomb isn't just some fancy decoration. It's a question the game wants you to answer, because Megaton, the settlement built around it, gives you a choice fairly early on. Disarm it and the town is safe, or take a contract from a very shady man in a very expensive suit, detonate it remotely and watch the whole thing go up from a penthouse window. Now I know I'm known for causing mass murder, genocide, and even the occasional tomfoolery, but I'm not even sick enough to blow up the damn bomb. But that's the DNA of the original game still living inside Fallout 3, with serious choices and real consequences. The environmental storytelling carries a similar weight. Scorched skeletons beside a bed, a half-finished office memo on a terminal about a missing stapler, sitting inside a building that no longer has walls. Nobody tells you these stories directly or asks you to engage with them, you just kind of find them, and you feel the weight of a civilization that existed and then didn't in the blink of an eye. Playing Fallout 3 feels less like inhabiting a protagonist and more like being an archaeologist almost, piecing together who these people were through whatever they left behind. That's what Fallout 3 does better than any other entry in this series in my opinion. The world itself is the achievement, and the fact that it pulled me in at 6 years old sitting next to my brother, and still pulls me in now 20 years after release, tells you everything you need to know. This game is S tier for me. And now, the other game you've all been waiting for. This is what many people call the peak of the franchise, a return to form of the original games in terms of writing, all developed by Obsidian. The discourse around this game is so loud and so constant, the entire corners of the internet have basically made glazing New Vegas their entire personality. So I wanted to see if I agree with all the Dunkin' Donuts employees that glaze the ever-living fuck out of this shit. So, New Vegas does something immediately that no other Fallout game does. It shoots you in the head and buries you in the desert. You crawl out of a shallow grave as someone who already has a history, a job, and a very specific person to be angry at. And that framing matters more than it seems, because the courier isn't defined by a family relationship or a childhood in a sealed bunker. They're a professional with a reckoning to settle, and that's a much wider canvas for actual roleplay. And speaking of wide canvases, the tutorial area in Goodsprings is completely optional. The game essentially points you towards it, but nothing is stopping you from ignoring the whole thing and walking straight toward New Vegas. In fact, I did exactly that. What I found though was a canyon absolutely stuffed with deathclaws, cazadors, and super mutants that killed me so many times I lost count. Oh my god. Turns out there's a reason the game nudges you toward the tutorial first, but the fact that you can attempt it anyway and suffer the very real consequence of that decision is the whole point. Eventually I made it to the strip, and the first thing on my agenda was finding Benny, the man who shot me and left me for dead. I marched straight to him, and I will say, the satisfaction of that confrontation was considerable. Boom! That was for my skull! From there I committed to the no gods, no masters ending. No faction, no allegiance, no master. Just the courier, a robot army, and a very firm middle finger to both the NCR and Caesar's Legion to get out the Mojave. Which brings me to why this game works so well as it does. You see, New Vegas was built from a specific mandate. Product director Joshua Sawyer walked into the very first development meeting and told his team, no good or evil, no black and white, everything in shades of gray. 50 of them preferably. The NCR looks like the obvious good guys at first. They're familiar, institutional, but it reveals itself as bureaucratically corrupt and stretched far beyond its own capacity. And then Caesar's Legion is genuinely terrifying but internally coherent. A civilization with a worldview rather than just a collection of villains. And then Mr. House is a brilliant autocrat who might actually be correct about what the Mojave needs and doesn't care at all what it costs. There's no faction you could join without becoming complicit in something. And that's not an accident. That's the purposeful design of the game. And the world actually remembers your choices in a way that Fallout 3 didn't quite manage. You side with the powder gangers in the opening area, and that decision follows you down the road to New Vegas. Faction patrols remember, settlements remember, and only decision in a small town carries forward across the entire map, because the whole game was built with those connections deliberately wired in. They even let you kill named characters essential to the main quest, which sounds like a design nightmare, but rather than making those characters unkillable, Obsidian built alternate routes through every major story beat to account for whatever chaos you might cause. That required the entire critical path to be constructed with contingencies for every possible act of destruction. all on an 18-month development cycle on a borrowed engine, which is the perfect segue into what doesn't work. Because New Vegas is, technically speaking, a bit of a disaster. The launch version crashed constantly, corrupted saves on PlayStation 3 after long sessions, and contained enough bugs to fill a dedicated wiki page that is still being updated today. The community has built stability patches that help significantly, but without them, the game remains fragile in a way that blocked a lot of players from finishing it. Then there's the open world problem. The game presents itself as a sandbox, but the fastest direct route to New Vegas from the starting area runs straight through a gauntlet of death claws and cazadors at levels designed to kill you immediately.
You will not leave this valley.
The intended path is quieter and longer, and the game very gently steers you toward it. But for a game whose entire identity is a consequence and player agency, funneling you through a specific opening route is a bit of a contradiction to that philosophy. And then the game just ends completely. When the main quest concludes, the entire world locks behind a final cutscene. Any unfinished content, any DLC you hadn't completed, all of it becomes inaccessible. In a game where you spent dozens of hours building relationships with the world, that can be quite painful design decision. So, does it deserve the glaze? Honestly, yes. Maybe not quite as much as it gets, but some has deserved a nice sprinkling of glaze. And not because it's a perfect game, it clearly isn't, but because what it got right is so specifically difficult to achieve, and so rarely achieved anywhere else, that the bugs in the gated map and the locked ending don't cancel it out. Building 4 major faction endings that players still argue about 15 years later, not because the game is ambiguous, but because it's honest about the cost of every outcome, that's a really impressive writing achievement most games with double the budget never even approach. The truth is, the game was rigged from the start. That line hits differently when you realize the entire Mojave was designed to make sure there was no way to win without losing something. New Vegas ended up selling 11.6 million copies, which is impressive for a game that crashed this much, but its reputation has always been bigger than its numbers, and honestly, that tracks. This game had to go into S tier. We'll discuss where exactly in S tier later in the video, because that's a tough conversation. Unlike the Elder Scrolls series, which featured 7 fucking mobile games, Fallout only has 1, and that's Fallout Shelter. Normally on this channel, I shit talk mobile games pretty heavily. I have a PC. I have consoles, so why the hell would I ever want to play games on my phone? But I can't just not play it for the video, so here we go. Fallout Shelter is a resource management base builder game, which isn't a bad start. I used to be pretty into a game called Sheltered a while back and I quite liked it. While not quite as engaging as that game, this was pretty dang close. You would manage your little vault dwellers, having them work in different areas, which is pretty standard. I had one overachiever in my vault in particular called Walter. He was a charismatic man, so naturally he became the vault breeder. There could also occasionally be events such as raiders attacking or rad roaches infesting your base. But to me, the best part of the game comes from sending vaulties out on expeditions to the overworld. Here they would go explore the wasteland to bring back loot such as guns and armor, as well as caps and even medical supplies. Though I realized if you log out without calling them back to base, the game just keeps going. I left these 2 poor bastards out in the wasteland for days as they tried to fight the good fight, but eventually both perished. But luckily, we had this fancy cool superpower called capitalism. So we bought a starter bundle that gives a few revives for our expedition, bringing those 2 back home. There are also named NPCs that you would recognize from the Fallout games, such as Moira Brown. Overall, this is a pretty addicting game, and I found myself unironically more entertained here than in either of the 2 Brotherhood of Steel spin-off games earlier. So that's why I gotta rank this a firm A tier. It's still a mobile game, so it is limited, but I think for what they had to work with, they did a phenomenal job. And it's much better than the Elder Scrolls mobile games. War never changes. But Bethesda did with Fallout 4, unfortunately. Unlike literally every other Bethesda game, they decided it would be a great idea to have a voiced protagonist. I hate it. I hate Nate. No offense, Mr. Epic, but it wasn't all that bad, thankfully. This game starts out like any Bethesda classic, in a situation where you could be considered a prisoner, this time in a cryo-freeze within a vault with your wife and young child, Sean. Soon after, Johnny Sins walks in and pops your wife and takes your son. Damn! Obviously, this pisses you off, so you break out and go on a revenge tour to kill Kellogg and rescue your son. Unfortunately, you were sleepy, and 60 years had passed between the incident and you waking up. Luckily, about 10 minutes after breaking free from the vault, you basically forget about your son and start your quest to run the greatest water-generating civilization of all time, effectively playing a Sims game with first-person shooting, which is a great segue into the building systems. Yeah, which honestly I love. Push! That's Chad right there, baby. I've spent hundreds of hours just trying to build the coolest settlements and then hundreds more with mods to make it even better. Some of the earliest Fallout 4 content I remember watching on YouTube was Oxhorn rebuilding settlements across the Commonwealth, and it inspired me quite a lot. So much so that Fallout 4 settlement builds became its own subgenre on YouTube. But what about the actual gameplay of Fallout? Well, Bethesda pulled a Skyrim. They simplified everything to make it as accessible to new audiences as much as possible, which naturally angered fans of older Fallouts and is the main reason New Vegas Glazers hate this game. I don't think it's necessarily bad though. It gets the job done without being a super complex RPG, which not every game has to be, and it showed in the sales too. This game clocked in almost half of the Fallout franchise's sales at 25 million as of today. But here's a fun statistic. The game sold 12 million copies at launch, generating $750 million within 24 hours. That's absolutely bonkers. People seem to speculate the game cost around $100 to $150 million to create. So to not only earn that in one day, but to also 7.5 times that is nuts. But just because it sold well doesn't mean the story is good. It's like an alright story that gets quite muddled in the middle as per usual. It starts out like, okay, I have to rescue my son and find my wife's killer, which you do. And then you learn that your son is a bastard and is running the Institute, an organization that creates sense and has been replacing people in the Commonwealth slowly. Okay, son needs to be stopped, but who do we side with? Our options are George Washington era role players. They're pros, they have a castle. They have cool outfits, they have laser muskets, and they have a dope addict grandma. The cons, Preston Garvey, and another settlement needs your help. Then we have the fuck yeah big dudes in badass power armor. The pros, the Pridwin, you get to live on a giant flying fortress. Power armor, you get a shiny suit of walking tank plating for free. Liberty Prime, a 40-foot tall robot that throws nukes like footballs. And Vertibird taxis, fast travel for people who like Gatling guns. The cons, Ad Victorium. They say it constantly. Elder Maxon, and No Chill. They basically want to confiscate your toaster if it looks too advanced. Then there's the Synth Sympathizers, or the Railroad. The pros, Ballistic Weave, which is literally the best armor upgrade in the game. There's the Deliverer, a James Bond pistol that's arguably the best stealth weapon. Deacon, the only companion who changes clothes more than a Barbie doll. And the Underground vibe. It feels like you're on a spy thriller as a secret agent. The cons, you live in a literal basement filled with dirt and candles. And they'll risk 10 humans to save one microwave with a personality. Then they always act like you're 5 minutes away from being exposed. Safe to say, this was a no-brainer. We're going Brotherhood of Steel. Flying Steel Fortress and Liberty Prime were enough to sell me on it. Beating down some clanker ass with a giant freedom robot is peak. But comparing the factions from this game to the other two 3D Fallouts, this game overall is probably the weakest on that front. I would say Fallout 4 overall for me ended up having more iconic, awesome moments. But the setting and the writing is weaker than both the other modern Fallout games. However, the gameplay here carries so hard that it's still within the conversation of the other two, even more so the second we bring modding into the mix, as this game's mod scene exploded. And the 25 million sales speaks for itself. This will be entering the S tier ring with the other Fallouts. Now, just 2 more games to go before I settle which game is the greatest Fallout of all time. When I did my Every Elder Scrolls video, the comments got my ass by saying I never did play the Skyrim pinball game, which I have since fixed, but I wasn't about to make that mistake twice, so let's get into Fallout Pinball. This game honestly is one of the most surprising games on the list to me. You would think that a pinball game would just be a lazy pinball game with a Fallout skin over it, but no. They went the extra mile. They gave us quests, character creation, and this asshole super mutant with one-liners.
Stupid lady!
This pinball game in particular is based on Fallout 4, so you'll see our very familiar voice protagonists in Nate and Nora, as well as fan favorites like Nick Valentine, Codsworth, and Dogmeat. There's also all the main factions from the game as well. You can do quests for the Minutemen, the Railroad, the Brotherhood of Steel.
Who the fuck are you and why are you bothering me?
The list really just goes on and on. I didn't think a pinball game could even have depth, but we're literally out here doing the special on a pinball character. But how do I rank it? Where does it stand amongst the other great Fallout games? I would say this is a solid A tier for me. It seems to have some actual passion put into it and the gameplay is fun, so slotting in right beside the Fallout Shelter feels right to me.
Game's over!
But now, onto everybody's favorite, Mr. Country Roads, Take Me Home, himself, Fallout 76. Over the last 8 years since Fallout 76 launched in 2018, I have tried and tried and tried again to play it and have a good time. Remember this game like it was yesterday, the launch with us hearing Take Me Home Country Roads 24/7. Then when I got my hands on it, it was an absolute bugged mess. So I just let it collect dust in my Steam library before trying it again after people were saying they fixed it. But each and every time I play for like an hour or two and just cannot for the life of me find the joy in this. This became the vicious cycle for me with Fallout 76 for at least 3 to 4 years, till I finally gave up and just intended to let it rot. That was until I needed to record some footage for my Sex in Every Fallout video, where I decided to give this game another go. Me and a buddy ran around, shooting up some locals, really firing at anything that would move, but it all really just felt aimless. Despite having questing, I had no real desire or reason to want to complete them. For me, this game just never landed. It all sort of seemed disjointed about what kind of experience they wanted to create, and I could just never sink hours into it properly, finding myself getting bored after 2 to 3 hours. Now, I do have friends that enjoy the game, so I don't just want to crap on it and say no one should play it, but it's definitely not for me, and this is my video, so my word is final. But where would I rank Fallout 76? Well, I don't think it's nearly as bad as the other spin-offs down in F tier, but it doesn't quite hold up to me compared to any of the main games. So to end it off, let's slot in our first C tier game. The question that everyone is waiting for. What is my definitive, super awesome, important opinion on what the best Fallout game ever made is after playing every single one? The hardest part about answering this question is that each of the games in S tier all do something different really well. Fallout 3 was all about the atmosphere and world building, Fallout New Vegas was all about the choices and non-linear experience, and then Fallout 4 came in with by far the best gameplay. So this choice really could just break down to what you prefer in games. But for me, drumroll please, I have to say that Fallout 3 is my favorite Fallout game of all time. This is a mix of both personal bias from growing up watching my dad play it, but also just I think the world is so amazing they can carry the less than amazing gameplay and the relatively linear choice as well. But unlike 4, I feel a lot more attached to Dad in Fallout 3, since you did the whole grow up in the vault stuff with him and the birthday. And the character being voiced by Liam Neeson also helps. While 4 is just some dumb baby who hasn't even developed a personality, so I don't care at all. I felt more excited finding Codsworth than Sean. And then New Vegas does have the best reason to progress the story because Benny is very shootable, but I find Vegas's world outside of the strip a lot less immersive than 3. So yes, start typing your angry New Vegas glazing comments about how stupid I am. I'm ready and waiting. And then here's the final tier list for y'all who want to see. Let me know what your rankings are down below, and if you enjoyed this, go ahead and watch this video next.